So, unfortunately, our next speaker today couldn't make it. Their name is James Sunderland, their pronouns are he, him, and their speech is going to be read today by our own Felix. Fern. Wish that stop.
Keep the microphone behind the speakers. Keep it behind the speaker line.
I'm having a day, sorry. Get that now. I'll do my best to try and give this speech justice for James. When I started writing for this moment, I first considered listing all of those we have lost as a community the past year, to shout their names of venerable government and let them know who they took from us because of their policies, their demonstration of people they have never met, and their arrogance in their prejudice. I chose not to do this in the end. The names that we hold close and hold tightly will be remembered. They will be said, have no doubt about that. But if I were to list them all to you now, the devastating list that seems to never end, it would take far longer than I have for you right now. So instead, I'm going to speak through our collective pain, our anger at a government that does not care, and raise our voice so they have no choice but to listen to us. To the corrupt Tory government, I accuse you directly of being the judge, jury, and executioner of all those who have lost their lives whilst waiting for treatment at gender identity clinics, of those who have died due to inflammatory actions taken by yourselves, including the mismanagement of our National Health Service. I hold you responsible for our transgender siblings who have been murdered by your lack of moral responsibility to call out the transphobic actions of your peers, of your country and your allies. You not only disband vital LGBT advisory panels, because who needs advice when you haven't eaten education, but your own equalities minister damages not only those who she is indeed meant to protect, but actively denounces programs such as Stonewall's diversity program. I could obviously go on to list the racist, xenophobic behaviours of certainly every member of the cabinet. There can be no doubt in any reasonable person's mind the current Tory party is the most corrupt, obscene and bigoted government since Thatcher. Let's talk about the Gender Recognition Act, that little dozy. The failed reform where they paid no attention to the voices that answered it simply because they did not provide the answers that they wanted. And then they re-released parts of the reform consultation, but only advertised it to those who they knew would provide the answers that they wanted. The answers that declared that the people of Britain thought that trans people are a threat whilst I take a shit. But because our voices were too loud, our vehemence to not be treated like this so strong, the reform long promised to us failed. Oh yes, they made it marginally more accessible to obtain a gender recognition certificate, but they did not listen to the demands we made. I'm going to prove a point, if it hasn't already been proven thousands of times over, from the cries of those here today, to those who marched through the streets almost a month ago, to those who share their stories over the internet, as to why it's vital to have a properly consulted reform of the GRA and to not cut funding to the gender identity clinics, increasing wait times exponentially more, not to continue to cut mental health services. To do this, I'm going to take you back to 2018. In 2018, transgender hate crimes rose 81% in Britain. Trump attempted to define transgender out of existence. And by the end of the year, more than 369 transgender individuals would have been murdered globally. This was also the year where I woke up one morning in February to find I could not walk, speak, or control fine motor movements. After gaining the ability to speak through a severe stutter, I was taken to A&E and spent 2 nights under a neurology department. One of the first questions I was asked by the neurologist was, "Were you abused as a child?" There was an insistence to the question, that the answer for my eventual diagnosis would be easier if I was. On release, accompanied by a set of crutches, was my diagnosis of functional neurological symptoms that presented its speech impediments, affected gait tremors, and later added to this list was chronic pain. But what does this have to do with the GRA? Am I simply venting my self-pity? I mention this because functional neurological disorder / symptoms is incredibly simply put. Your brain getting so stressed or overwhelmed from some form of trauma that it just decides that nope, not dealing with this, and creates a symptom to deal with that trauma. Further following up with the neurologist in checkups, it was concluded that the lived experience of being transgender in this country was so traumatic that it caused my brain to do what it did. He later hypothesized that it was actually likely that a lot of transgender individuals may experience FND at some point in their lives due to collective experiences that invoke trauma. For me, I regained the ability to walk outside of periods of exercise stress, and my speech is not nearly as affected. My pain, however, is chronic, and tremors may never go away. But here's the kicker. I know I am extremely privileged in my experience as a transgender individual. I was mostly supported when I came out by college friends and most family members, and I was lucky to have a GP who referred transgender individuals to GICs before, both young and old. I was lucky that I was seeing a psychiatrist who, alongside my GP, would actively stand up for me and gave me the tool to contact pals when necessary, who helped me with my mental health whilst it spiraled. I was lucky that I had some form of support base, and I recognised my privilege of having that. But they cannot stop rubbish being thrown in the street of the small town that I lived in, the constant misgendering by strangers and family members. It cannot stop being forced to wear a female uniform at work and being told that if you do not use your legal name, then there will be consequences. It does not stop you from being sexually assaulted whilst at a nightclub running an LGBT+ night and being asked, do you want to be treated like a girl, when they find your binder? Or relatives asking, can you not just be a lesbian? Or being told you can't use the men's changing rooms because it would be improper. Imagine, and for many it will not just be imagining, that this lucky and privileged experience does not get a support structure, or to those who have more traumatizing, different experiences, or those who may have to wait up to 6 years to be seen at a gender identity clinic because our government just doesn't care. If what I have lived caused the trauma that caused me to lose my speech, gait, stability, that gave me an almost dependence on pain medication and pain management to get through the day, then what will this trauma do to those who are more vulnerable? I came out at the age of 17. What about those who come out at 7, where they face prejudice from such a young age? Or those who come out at 70, who have been in the closet for almost their entire lives? Something coincidentally being raised by organisations such as Age UK, where they talk about the trauma of being transgender and having dementia, forgetting that you are out, remembering the pain. If this government continues to go down the path of defunding services for transgender children, refusing the right to self-identification, refusing transgender individuals basic human rights, what will continue to happen? Currently recorded, almost half of all trans people in Britain have attempted suicide at least once, and 84% have considered it at some point. There are great charities that look to help transgender individuals, specifically kids, such as Mermaids and Gendered Intelligence. But they should not be shouldered the burden caused directly by a government that does not care about the others. A government that can't be bothered to help and who uses falsities and misinformation to incite masses against one another instead of holding those in power accountable. A government that shoulders the blame on crimes such as sexual assault in bathrooms, ignoring that it is proven that trans feminine individuals are more likely to be assaulted, that 50% of all transgender people will be sexually assaulted in their lifetimes. Clearly, our government, and specifically Ms. Truss, is choosing inflammatory and false claims to justify removing human rights from those who are already vulnerable. Our existence is a direct attack on a government that does not care. We will continue to exist like we have throughout history, no matter how much they try to erase us. But we will not be silenced. We demand that our government respects the human rights of not only transgender individuals, but of all minorities. That the government respects the right to free speech and not to continue to criminalise freedom of expression, such as their anti-protest bill and their amendments to the Official Secrets Act, where they want it to be that you can be imprisoned for up to 14 years if you embarrass an MB. We demand that they ensure the safety of the vulnerable by stopping their fear-mongering rhetoric and give transgender individuals the same rights that they award themselves. Thank you. Can we get a big round of applause for James Sunderland?